the agenda of the day. I'll pass the microphone to Yusuf to do that and to give us a run-through of the agenda for the day. For all our online speakers and participants, please, if you have some technical issues, just to drop a message on the platform, and our technical team would immediately respond to it. So, Yusuf, over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Welcome today again. We are not going to present all the panels today to introduce all of them because we are running late a bit. We'll introduce you the first panel, which is going to happen now. This is focusing on the finance and agriculture, and we'll have the chance and opportunity to have Mouna Lyoubi as the moderator. She's a consultant for the UN on agriculture on a project called OYA, and we'll have the opportunity to hear more about her and what she's doing. We have also other panelists.
can probably start now. Hello, everyone. My name is Lyoubi. I'm the coordinator of the Opportunities for Youth in Africa program on UNIDO's side. It is a joint implemented program at UNIDO and FAO, and it aims at accelerating job creation for young Africans in the agribusiness and agriculture sector. I'm very glad to be here with you and to moderate this web talk on the contribution of technology in the development of the continent and talk a little bit more about the OYA program. So I'm very grateful for our panelists. We have 5 panelists today, 3 are online. We'll be joined soon by Ms. Aisha Rahim Bolarinwa, founder at Farms 2 from UK, Nigeria, as well as Mr. Rotimi Williams, founder of Kiriksu Rice Farm and Resolute 4.0 from UK, Nigeria. But let me present you Mr. Calvin Jodisi, CEO of Ascenti Africa from Kenya, Takunda Chingonzo, CEO Tech Village from Zimbabwe, and Alexander Pedrotti, who's an entrepreneurship expert from UNIDO. So welcome to all of you here today. I will give the floor to our panelists, starting from Calvin Jodisi, to present yourself.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever part of the world you're from. My name is Calvin. Just as Mouna mentioned, I'm actually based in Nairobi. I'm the CEO and founder of Ascenti Africa, and it's my pleasure being part of this conversation today, and looking forward to a great conversation around what we're doing in Kenya, and also how OYA is already making impact here in Nairobi. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. We're very happy to have you among us today. I'll give the floor to Mr. Chingonzo Takunda. Can you present yourself?
Sure. Good morning. I'm not sure if you can hear me well.
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Takunda Chingonzo. I'm the founder and CEO of the Tech Village Innovation Hub. It's an innovation hub that's based in Zimbabwe, in Bulawayo, which is the second city. And I look forward to having a very progressive and insightful conversation with everybody.
Thank you, Takunda. We're very happy to have you here. Now I'll give the floor to Alexander Pedrotti. We cannot hear you, Alexander. You are muted. Perfect.
Sorry. Hi, Mouna. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for ADYFE to invite me to DIDA 2021. I'm Alexandre, and I run a business incubator in Vienna with around 20 startups under a roof. And I'm as well working part-time with the African division for the UNIDO as expert in entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Alexandre. We're very happy to have you here among us. So as I mentioned earlier, we are going to discuss the contribution of technology in the development of the continent, but also in relation to agribusiness and agriculture with the perspective of entrepreneurship. And I'm very happy to have you 3 participate in this panel because as you presented yourself, 3 of you have an extensive experience in creating an environment where entrepreneurs can either develop their business, but also learn from each other, as Calvin mentioned. So can you please tell us a bit more about your business and how it contributes to mainstreaming technology in the continent or where you work, as Alexandre is based in Vienna, and where you see the opportunity there for youth-led SMEs. So I'll probably start with Takunda.
Sure, thank you so much. So the Tech Village, as I said in the introduction, is basically an innovation hub, and we also run a co-working space within the city. I think where we exist and the reason why we exist is it's kind of born out of the fact that we realize that there are a lot of opportunities within the community and the ecosystem that we're existing in. But the challenge that we have and that the youth are facing and they have been facing is not having the right and conducive environment for looking at ideas, working through those ideas and trying to see how to match, some of the technology and the concepts that they have with the opportunities that are on the ground. I think if you go online, you find a lot of information and concepts and sort of papers around the adoption of different technologies, but it's always very different when you bring that onto the ground and you try and interface it with, what is existing on the ground within the market. And so this is kind of where we exist as an innovation hub. We serve as a space and environment where ideas are tolerated, where ideas are stretched and explored, and where failure is anticipated and embraced as part of the learning process. In business, that tolerance is not as welcome. I think we are seeing a change in culture, but this is kind of where the role in itself plays. Over and above that, there's also the need for exposure to new technologies. Because when you talk about agribusiness, we've seen the more traditional sort of models being adopted, whether it's from the farmer's perspective or whether it's from the market's perspective. And so we also play a critical role in looking at new technologies and how they can be adapted within the ecosystems that we play. Specifically, we've worked with a good number of entrepreneurs in trying to make data around the market and marketplace more accessible. We realize that data is a core component of this entire element, as it drives first and foremost the choice of cropping or produce that is produced by the farmer, but also more importantly, the kind of value chain that is developed around this entire agribusiness market in itself. And so we kind of exist in this space where we provide that space, we provide the infrastructure, we do provide access to tools and resources and access to networks as well for the solutions to effectively try and grow. It is a very difficult environment, I must say, equally for ourselves and the entrepreneurs that we work with. As I said, the failure rate is very, very high. And it's interfaced by the fact that a good number of the young people, specifically in Zimbabwe, but I think that the story is the same across the continent, are getting into entrepreneurship not out of the idealized, need to build something cool or start your own business. It's actually based on survival. And so when you look at survival-based entrepreneurship, it is very, very different. You can come with a program that's, geared around growth and scale, and it's all well and fine, but the ideals and the objectives of the founders might be different. And so there's been the need to contextualize that, because only when a founder is able to take care of, their domestic or social needs, can they begin to innovate and think about building something that is sustainable, that is scalable, or that can actually grow and have meaningful social and economic impact. And so that's that context, and surely it's not the same across all ecosystems, because the different African countries have different ecosystems and challenges in them. But for us, this has been kind of our starting point, and the opportunity that lies there is, starting to create a solid platform for innovation to happen, and then taking that into the marketplace, and then hopefully beginning to scale that. That's in short, I think, in brief, what I can unpack from that.
Thank you, Takunda. This gives a very clear idea of the context, specific context in Africa, and Zimbabwe is an African country, and also challenges of youth. And thank you for mentioning the failure aspect of it and how important it is as a step to success, and how you can embrace failure and learn from it. I'd like to jump to Calvin, and if you might kind of go deeper with this peer learning factor that was mentioned by Takunda, and how Ascenti, as an African network, how you're working to strengthen that as a very important component in the entrepreneurship world in Africa and with the African context.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mouna, and also thank you very much, Takunda. I think those were quite insightful contribution that you've just made out there. One of the things that Ascent has been, spearheading pretty much here in Nairobi, especially, across also Africa, but we actually work a lot with university students, because we believe that, for us to start nurturing entrepreneurship, we must also start, working with university students so that we can actually nurture entrepreneurship from there, and they can actually be able to know the need of them using, the knowledge they are gaining to actually be able to shape themselves to be entrepreneurs, and even also positioning themselves to the right business that they can be able to do. Because one of the things that we've seen, that a lot of young people would probably leave universities, maybe they studied, somebody maybe did like, biotechnology, for example, but that they're actually going to go into fashion. And it's because nobody actually showed them that you can actually do this and this from biochemistry, for example. And so one of the things that we do a lot, and we've done a lot of trainings for university students, especially third year students and also the fourth year students, and be able to help them. How do you align yourself with the kind of course that you've invested 4 years, 5 years in that particular line? And I can say that has really, really healed a lot of fruits, because you find that the students actually start understanding that, okay, so I didn't know that I can actually do something aligned to my, to my course and all that. Because one of the things that we've seen is, you find, medical students just want to go and do start a restaurant. Yes, it's a good idea, but it's not aligned with what they've actually spent a lot of time doing. We don't want a country where we are going to invest a lot of technology, a lot of skills, and young people, and teach them innovation, but then they end up doing things that actually maybe not in a bad way, maybe even a dropout can actually be able to do. And so if we can actually be able to start aligning that in Africa and having all this conversation, and also looking at, some of the projects that they do, because we have really excellent students, they come out with very nice projects at the end of their education, but most of these projects definitely, they're just going to gather dust, because they're just going to be used for for grading and all that. But then this is a conversation that we actually started having with universities, and we want to see how can we even take it to another level and actually help these people start building businesses around what actually they've studied and what they have knowledge around. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. It's a very interesting point what you just brought up in terms of nurturing entrepreneurship at the level of university students, giving them the skills that they might need at a later stage to develop their business, because when they're studying a certain major, and then when they get to the employment level, then they need those skills. But it's very interesting that you bring it at the same level as Takunda did, as a survival kit. When they drop out, they need to have those skills if they want to open a restaurant or whatever business that they want to do to survive economically. And these are skills that need to be mainstreamed throughout the educational system. And I would like to invite Alexandre to talk a little bit about the startup, the business incubator in Vienna. But also, since failure and dealing with failure, especially in the startup world, is universal, is global, no matter where you are from, let it be African continent or Europe or developing country or developed country. Can you tell us a bit more about your incubator, but also how you support these entrepreneurs when it comes to failure? Alexandre, the floor is yours.
We see failures every day, but you need to jump back and to be even more aggressive afterwards. But I think it's part of the entrepreneurship lifestyle. This failure sometimes, unfortunately, but we are all learning from this. And we saw it also with this period, the last 2 years. I had very successful companies with me, and because of COVID time, they failed. And everyone was expecting them to be like booming new boomers, and it didn't happen. But now they're back on their feet. They had a very difficult period. They are back again with us and creating new things. So adapting as well to the situation, because everything, as we saw the last 2 years, everything can happen as an entrepreneur. And you need to be ready to change very fast your business model. Yeah,
exactly. Thank you, Alexandre, for bringing this up, because you are right. I mean, COVID-19 has brought a negative impact on businesses, as you've mentioned, but has also, let's say, presented some opportunities to businesses, especially in agribusiness, because it was considered as a necessity business to stay open and to provide for food sovereignty in several countries, especially in Africa. And we've seen also some challenges in Europe. But it also pushed entrepreneurs to adopt some technological tools, digitalization, and to open up to this new online world. I'd like, Takunda, do you know of some experiences where businesses had to totally shift their business model, their sales model, to adapt to this new context, and how it enabled them to explore new customers or new markets?
No, definitely. I think you're right that the pandemic, as tragic and devastating as it was, also had opportunity for entrepreneurs. I think chief of which we saw the disruption of most of our value chains for farmers, right? Most of the marketplaces, most of the destinations where produce was brought and sort of redistributed were effectively closed down because of the restrictions. And I think this presented a very interesting opportunity both for some of the entrepreneurs that we had, but also the farmers as well that we're dealing with. So one of the things that we saw was a more direct to consumer approach that farmers took, especially on the fresh produce side of things, where farmers began to look at what social media was, how it worked, building a brand around their farm, not just focusing on the production, but then using this to actually develop a direct list of customers where they could deliver produce directly, which I think was very, very fascinating. In Zimbabwe, we definitely saw the increase in number of produce delivery sort of businesses, as well as a lot of marketplace-oriented businesses. And by that, I mean, those who are trying to aggregate produce from different farmers and then match that with demand on the other side in terms of customers. So I think it was quite interesting in that sense. We actually got a lot of young farmers who came to us, reached out to the Innovation Hub, looking to understand better how to use tools, how to use WhatsApp as a business platform, as a marketplace, how to actually effectively go through that entire process. And I think that was quite interesting because farming and agribusiness in Zimbabwe is an agro-based economy largely. It hadn't seen as much innovation in that respect. I think there's also a lot that can be said around the consumptive behavior of households as well, because a lot of people had a lot of time on their hands. We saw a lot of urban, in quotes, farming and sustainability-oriented farming beginning to happen. A lot more people became more conscious about what they're eating and where they're sourcing some of this food. And of course, that appeals to a very specific and niche sort of market. But I think all of these presented very key and unique opportunities that we saw entrepreneurs beginning to take up and to explore. And I think if we extrapolate this going out of the country, I think we've seen similar disruptions in markets and in distribution sort of means across the board. And I think there are opportunities to then match the demand that is there for produce, for organic produce, with the suppliers and the farmers that we have. I believe chief of all of this is the access to the data and the understanding, which is where I think the diaspora really comes into play to better understand some of these markets. I love Africa in the sense that it's 54 different countries, and that presents a unique challenge in the fact that these are 54 effectively different markets as well. And this is just before we leave the continent and to look at other destinations for produce. And so I think looking at that need, looking at the demand that is there, and being able to make that information available to our farmers or our people who are producing, I think there is a very significant opportunity that is there in building a much more efficient marketplace that drives production through information and data and increases the value that cascades down to farmers and their value chain going downwards. I think we're going to see an evolution in this sort of space going into the next couple of years as we become more aware and conscious of our consumption and our sourcing of food.
Thank you, Takunda. I think the very, very relevant point that you bring, also the important point of data and how data can be processed, analyzed, and used to have these important information in terms of market access and already what's going on now, because before, yes, it was direct to consumer or with intermediaries, but there was no trace of it. But now using new online e-commerce, even for the business itself, can track more and better the efficiency of its process as well as its production. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Ms. Aisha Rahim from Bolarinwa, founder at Farms D2, UK, Nigeria. Aisha, can you hear us now? I knew that you had some struggle, I think, connecting. Aisha, I think we could hear some noise in the beginning. Can you try to unmute your mic? Okay, so we'll give some time to Aisha to figure the technical aspects. And I'd like to go back to Alexandre, because I know that you have an intensive expertise in terms of technology use, but not on the inside of the value chain that Mr. Takunda mentioned in terms of sales, but rather on the production side and how technology can be better used to make the produce more effective and get more products for the sales. So can you tell us a bit more about your experience?
Sure. I will give also like a concrete example. I'm actually getting very interested about all these drones for agriculture. And I got a chance to meet a young entrepreneur from Ivory Coast a few weeks back. And he was explaining me why the technology is now so important for agriculture. And for cost saving, efficiency, profitability. So they realized that by using this drone, they could have a better rentability for all the production, and I think this is amazing. So all the technology can be used. But also, I want to give an example of, as well, some people are going back as well to the traditional method of the past, and this is an example I can give as well from Europe. I was starting now a wine business, and we used to use machine to take the wine, to take the grapes, but now we are going back to traditional method, going to do like hand picking for the grapes. So everything it's innovating in a way, but as well we go back as well to some traditional methods.
Yes, thank you, Alexandre. I think we understand your point in terms of finding that balance. When is technology a smart way to make your production more efficient, but how can it affect maybe the quality, and some products may need to have traditional use and traditional know-how that shouldn't be wasted as well. And I'd like to try to get Aisha jump into this if her mic is working now. Aisha? Can you hear us? Can you unmute your mic and jump in on this? No, I think maybe Audrey can help her get it. Okay. We'll see if she can join us at a later stage. Calvin, I know that you do some farming on the side. And can you give us your point of view as a farmer in terms of using technology, and how realistic is that? I mean, we can speak about using technology and innovation, but I know it needs investment, it needs training, it needs know-how. So from your point of view, how do you see that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mouna, and also, the points that Alexander has brought through, I think it's quite, it's quite important as well. Definitely, I don't practice like very large scale farming and all that. Is mostly small scale, and so use of technology is not really much in my end. But what I've seen with most farmers who are more like into large scale, technology become very very relevant and quite important for them as well. For example, I have a friend of mine who has almost 70 acres, and he does vegetables. And basically what he uses all manner of technologies, from drone, especially for spraying, and he uses drip irrigation, mostly kind of a bit technical as well. And so I think it just depends with the size. So for example, if you're a small scale farmer, you might not need to use technology a lot, because sometimes you have to look at the cost as well, because as a small scale farmer, your output might not be as much as that can actually meet the demand of technology, because definitely some technology is quite expensive. Example, maybe buying a drone that actually you can be able to use, especially for spray and all that kind of stuff, and even even just studying the technology aspect of it. So I think it just depends with the scale that you are in, and also definitely you have to look at the output. Don't invest in technology that want it to have return, because technology is one of the means of production. And so if you're going to invest in technology, just make sure that technology can actually you can actually get an output out of it, because the major reason why you use technology is actually to increase our output. And so I think there's a technology in farming is time, be it in form of from irrigation to things like pruning, to things, all those different aspects as well. And I've seen because I also move a lot in the country, and I've seen especially if you go to the central part where they do a lot of wheat farming and all that, and you can be able to see they actually use a lot of drone technology and all that kind of stuff, especially when it comes to spraying and all that. And literally they get a lot of the production is quite huge. They're able to harvest thousands and thousands of bags, and definitely that gives a lot of economical sense as well. And so technology is quite key, and just as Alexander said, you have to also mix with tradition. Farming has always been tradition, so there's no way that you only focus on technology and not go back to the real traditional way that farming should be done. So yes, blend technology, but also remember, how can you also bring the aspect of traditional farming? For example, you find that most farmers still use manure, like local manure, for example. Mm-hmm. Not most of them are using fertilizers. And then you'll find that using manure, actually, it's very good, because that is organic. You're going to get, you're going to get really, really good crops, and they're very organic. It's good for our health and all those kind of stuff. So I think it's also very important for us to find, when do we blend the technology versus the traditional way of how we've been doing things, especially when it comes to farming. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin. I think you've brought two important points. The first one is the case of small-scale farmers, and let's be honest, they represent the majority of agricultural producers in the continent, in all countries. included. And so this perspective is very important. And also what you mentioned is how can we introduce technology without losing that traditional know-how or savoir-faire, but still, I mean, we know that agriculture also comes with some burden in labor. And so how can technology maybe ease that burden? I'd like to try again and see if Aisha, I can see her, so I probably will hear her. Aisha, can you hear us? Can you are you unmuted? We cannot hear you. No, we cannot hear you. So hopefully if Audrey can help you, and we'll get back to you as soon as I ask this question to Takunda. While Aisha is, I see you, you're muted actually. So, no, we cannot hear you, sorry. If Audrey can support again. We already see her, so that's a good thing. Takunda, with your hub, and you've mentioned helping businesses, incubating those businesses who have innovative ideas, and you support them. Can you give us some examples of how businesses in Africa thought of innovative and technological solutions to develop, and who need, and you think that they need some scaling up?
Sure. So so as a hub, a lot of our support is predominantly provided in the early stages of some of these companies, and they do eventually grow and scale out of the innovation hub as they begin to build. One of the startups that we supported quite a bit in the earlier stages, and they've gone on to do some pretty remarkable work, is a startup called Farm Hut, and their marketplace that's based in Zimbabwe. And one of the things that they're beginning to look at now is growing that marketplace for local farmers, from small scale all the way up to commercial farmers, to be able to route their produce to the intended markets in the most efficient manner possible. One of the bigger challenges that we've seen farmers having is the lack of the infrastructure, whether it's from a logistics perspective, whether it's cold storage infrastructure. There's a lot of wastage of produce that happens across that entire value chain, and their ability to match the demand with the supply, I think, is one of the key sort of things that we've seen coming through. We've worked with a startup called Tumeza, which is a logistics startup. Primarily, they started by providing last mile logistics support, and which you can imagine a lot of that is trying to get things like inputs and supplies to hard to reach places within our environments. A large populace of our country, or rather a large area of our country, is still rural, and where you find a lot of these farmers, you don't have as much infrastructure built in for logistics. And so trying to figure that out, whether it's on the input side or whether it's bringing produce to market, has been a key element. And in fact, it's one of the bigger problems that we've seen farmers complaining about, that they produce really high quality food, produce, but because they lack the logistics infrastructure, middlemen are able to now come in, buy very high quality produce at very low prices, and then make a hefty profit just because of this logistics element. And some of these startups that I was mentioning are really coming in to try and drive an innovative solution that is low cost, that is effective, but that at the end of the day enables farmers to thrive within their ecosystem.
Thank you, Takunda. Yeah, this is a very interesting example, and again, this is a challenge that we face in most countries in Africa, because it's good to produce, but then yes, storage can definitely hinder the production of a business, of a small farmer. So I would like to ask question to Calvin, and bring in the youth perspective in all of this. How do you see youth as, in terms of opportunities and innovation in the sector? Because for Kenya, like access to land is a challenge, like in other countries for youth. And we see lack of interest in agriculture in general because it's labor, burden, etc. But there is an opportunity for youth to come in maybe later stages of agriculture, which means agribusiness and the whole value chain. But where do you see the opportunity of youth and how they can step in and make their mark in the sector?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, what you said is really true. I mean, Kenya still have a very big challenge when it comes to, land ownership, especially for young people, because, most of them always look at either inheriting land or, or maybe if you're interested in agribusiness, then you might actually need to lease the land maybe for one year or 2 years or something like that. And definitely that's quite a big challenge because you don't expect, a young person to actually have money that actually they can be able to easily lease land. But apart from that, I think there's need for, just as I started saying from the beginning, there's need for this conversation starting in the universities, for example. Kenya has so many universities that actually focuses on agribusiness. And we have so many, I think almost all universities, especially public universities, has very big component of agriculture, and most of them, because some of our universities here are quite huge, and so they actually have farms that these students can actually be able to practice agriculture, and they can actually be able to do a lot of things. But then you find that once they leave campus, then what they're going to look at is they're actually looking for jobs. And so they're not looking at, okay, I was in I attended this university, and I've been actually helping. I was able to help maybe grow this amount of food for the universities and all that kind of stuff. But then what they think is like, oh, can I get a job with FAO, for example? Can I get a job with maybe UNIDO, or maybe can I get a job with maybe One Acre Fund, for example, like those big agribusiness related companies, but not realizing that there's actually a need for me to actually start, either lease land, use the skill that I have and knowledge that I have to actually be able to do something on my own. And so I think there should be need to focus on, like, hey, you live in campus and you're actually going to start your own agriculture, and you're going to get, you have to get maybe land and start producing your own food, and you can be able to sell outside there. But there's this possibility as long as young people are actually passionate, and I think it starts with a small, it starts with that passion, like, those who don't live in the city, and most of the time people actually have either the grandfathers back in the village. They can actually go start utilizing that land and start growing something. You don't have to start very big. You can start by just having a nursery where you plant either vegetables and then sell that, to the community. So you're going to be more like, you're going to grow the seeds, and then after maybe a period of time, you can actually sell that to the community, and that interest is going to be cultivated. So I don't think that we really need to look at it starting from like, oh, I have to have a very big land for me to be able to start my agriculture. I just need to have that passion and then start small. So I just start with planting a few seedlings, maybe 1,000 of them, selling into the community. It's going to fetch me a little money, but then I'm going to start there until I'm able to maybe get some money and actually I'm able to lease a big land maybe for 1 year or 2 years and actually be able to get going when it comes to agriculture. So I think for me that would be the best start, and then we can go, you can go from 1 acre to 2 acres to 3 acres and going on by on until you actually are going to be definitely successful. But again, just the last point is that we also need to encourage young people to make them feel that agriculture is not, is not because you didn't go to school, or it's for the less privileged, or it's just because you can't get a job. But we just need to make them feel that actually without you guys we won't survive, because we won't have food. And so they need to see that importance, because we all actually globally, we all need agribusiness or agriculture to be able to have sufficient food and for us to be able to sustain the planet as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Calvin, for these wise words. And it's funny that you talk about passion and its importance and going step by step. And I'd like to link it with the first point that we discussed through Takunda and overcoming failure. And I think that it closes that circle of overcoming failure needs, first of all, passion. Because if you're passionate, then you overcome failure. But also having baby steps, starting small and then growing your business or your idea to overcome this failure. I'd like to thank the panelists and apologize that we couldn't hear Aisha. I'm sure that she had insightful inputs for the panel. And I'd like to ask each one of you to close this session with a phrase or two that we would like to, that the participants can take with them. Alexandre, would you like to conclude with a sentence or two?
I will conclude because we didn't talk so much also about the diaspora. And as well, I think it's very important that coming from the US, coming from Europe, they're coming as well with new ideas and new way of working. And I think they will bring this economic growth and stability as well with all these new ideas. And this is very important.
Thank you, Alexandre. Yes, you're right, and I think that knowing the challenges of the African context and learning more about how maybe smallest technologies as logistics that can, for diaspora, be basic technology because it's happening elsewhere, are the good opportunities and maybe the best entrance and also about peer learning that we mentioned in the beginning. So, Mr. Takunda, can you give us a conclusion and also your point of view on how diaspora can come in?
Sure. I think building on Alexander's point, the diaspora has traditionally been viewed just as a source of money, especially by people that are on the continent. But I think the opportunity is much bigger than that. I think it's that what we need to try and create is a scenario where the opportunity that is on the continent meets the knowledge and insight and demand that is in the diaspora to create value for everybody. I think when that happens, we will see the growth of innovation and adoption of technology across multiple value chains in Africa. And I think the diaspora has a very significant role to play in this. In guiding and in spearheading, that development. Because if the diaspora doesn't lead this development, then we will see a lot of international entrants coming onto the continent to explore the opportunities that otherwise local producers, local innovators would be able to effectively sort of pursue. So let's meet and let's match that demand with opportunity and create value for everyone.
Thank you, Takunda. Very wise. Thank you. Calvin, would you like to add something on how diaspora can come in and collaborate with businesses and help the knowledge transfer as well?
Yeah. All the time we've always talked about, remittance, when government gives a report, they'll say, oh, this year we had 1 billion shillings from diaspora remittance. And definitely, Africa benefits a lot when it comes to remittance from diaspora. But I think it's high time that we actually bring in a new other aspect of value. And I think the diasporans have very huge knowledge in terms of expertise and all that. And I think despite we focus on the remittance, I think it's high time that we focus on the value in terms of expertise value. I would love to see more of the diasporans collaborating with, for example, innovation hubs, collaborating with young people, sharing their skills to be able to actually help young people, especially who are in agribusiness. For me, I think that would go way further than even the remittance that we always talk about, in the financial support that, yes, we get from the diaspora, but I think it's high time that we actually get the knowledge and the skill value from the diaspora.
Thank you all. I think very relevant your conclusion remarks with the DIDA 2021 outcomes. I was very happy to host this session. And if you want to learn more about the OYA program, I invite you all to connect through our Twitter account, OYA Programme, or subscribe to our YouTube channel for the events. And I'll be happy to network with you, panelists, and any participants through LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone, and meet you soon.
Thank you, Mouna.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.